At 1:23 a.m. on April 26, 1986, operators inside the control room of Reactor 4 initiated an emergency shutdown. They pressed a button known as AZ5, expecting a routine insertion of control rods to safely power down the core. Instead of dropping, the reactor's power levels surged. Within 3 seconds, it spiked to more than 100 times its maximum designed capacity. The intense heat flashed the cooling water into high-pressure steam, triggering an explosion that blew the 1,000-ton roof off the reactor. Seconds later, a second blast scattered burning graphite and nuclear fuel into the night sky. In a fraction of a second, the stability of the plant vanished. It was the beginning of an industrial disaster on a scale the world had never seen, one that would soon force a total reckoning with the design of these machines and the state that built them. In the 1970s and 80s, the Soviet Union aggressively expanded its civilian nuclear program to power its vast economy. They built massive complexes alongside model cities like Pripyat, a vibrant, modern town designed specifically to house thousands of plant workers and their young families. The backbone of this expansion was the RBMK-1000 reactor. But as this technical documentation shows, the design contained a severe vulnerability. It possessed a highly positive void coefficient of reactivity. In a water-cooled reactor, steam bubbles are called voids. In most global designs, an increase in steam slows the nuclear reaction, but in the RBMK, an increase in steam actually accelerates fission. Under specific operating conditions, this creates a runaway physical loop. More steam creates more heat, which generates even more steam. Those specific conditions aligned perfectly on the night of April 25th. Following a 9-hour delay ordered by the regional power grid, an unprepared night shift inherited a stalled safety test. The reactor's power had plummeted unexpectedly, filling the core with neutron-absorbing xenon gas and choking off the reaction. To prevent the reactor from shutting down completely and missing the maintenance schedule, Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov ordered his operators to manually withdraw nearly all the control rods. The core was now running in a highly unstable state, held back only by liquid water and xenon. When the reactor ruptured, the blast obliterated the building and tore away the biological shield. The graphite moderator inside the core was now exposed to the open air, where it ignited and began burning at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. Within minutes, local fire brigades arrived on the scene, led by Lieutenants Vladimir Pravik and Viktor Kibanok. Believing they were fighting a conventional industrial fire, they climbed onto the roof of the adjacent turbine hall. They fought back the flames without specialized protective gear, unaware they were standing next to an open reactor core emitting lethal doses of radiation. Their rapid response prevented the fire from jumping to the other 3 operating reactors, but the exposure was catastrophic. Both men, along with dozens of their crew, would succumb to acute radiation syndrome within weeks. Driven upward by the intense heat of the graphite fire, a massive plume of radioactive isotopes, including iodine-131 and cesium-137, vented into the atmosphere. Prevailing winds carried this fallout north and west, silently depositing radioactive material across Belarus, Poland, and Scandinavia. Yet just 3 kilometers away in Pripyat, the morning of April 26th proceeded exactly like any other spring day. 50,000 citizens shopped, played outside, and gathered for weddings, completely unaware of the invisible hazard settling over their streets. It took 36 hours for local authorities to finally order an evacuation. Convoys of buses removed the population under the false pretense of a temporary 3-day relocation. None of them would ever return. Internationally, the Soviet government maintained total silence. As the reactor continued to burn, officials steadfastly refused to acknowledge the disaster, going so far as to force citizens in Kyiv and Minsk to march in outdoor May Day parades to project an image of stability. But the fallout could not be hidden. On April 28th, radiological safety engineers at the Forsmark nuclear plant in Sweden detected high levels of radiation on their clothing and subsequently traced the wind patterns back to the Soviet Union. Faced with international demands for an explanation, Moscow was forced to confess to the world. Containing the exposed core required an enormous mobilization effort. The Soviet Union drafted over 600,000 personnel, known as liquidators, to decontaminate the zone. These civil and military workers performed grueling manual labor in highly toxic environments. Coal miners tunneled beneath the melting core to prevent it from reaching the water table, while others hand-shoveled radioactive debris off the reactor roof when remote-controlled machines failed due to the intense radiation. Working in brief, highly restricted shifts to limit their exposure, construction crews hastily built a massive concrete and steel structure over the ruins of Unit 4. This sarcophagus was designed to entomb the remaining nuclear material and halt the spread of dust. Unable to contain the disaster through technology alone, the state relied on the sheer volume and physical sacrifice of its own citizens to mitigate a disaster caused by its own systemic failures. Decades later, as the original sarcophagus began to deteriorate, an international effort funded a modern engineering solution. In 2016, the 36,000-ton new safe confinement arch was carefully slid into place over the reactor to secure the site for the next century. Outside this high-tech shield, the 30-kilometer exclusion zone remains largely untouched by human habitation. In the ghost city of Pripyat, concrete structures are slowly crumbling as forests and wildlife reclaim the abandoned streets. The new safe confinement is designed to stand for 100 years, overlooking a landscape that may not be safely habitable for thousands. It remains a silent record of a catastrophe that began in a control room and was only stopped by those willing to face the fallout.